recording with Jagdish Nanavati on 30th of September at his residence. So Jagdish, when did you start trekking and mountaineering? Or interest developed at what age and how did you start?
See, when I was a child, my father and my parents, we used to go to hill stations regularly. And he was very fond of nature, and he wanted us to enjoy natural beauty. And we used to go for long walks, show around various places. So my interest in and my family interest also, my sisters, etc., they also got interested in outdoor life. And more so when we went to hill stations like Mambleshwar, Panchagini, and also Kashmir. Um those were the days when I took interest in outdoor life. Then, but in the beginning, my main interest was to enjoy sightseeing.
This was all at what age?
I'm talking of
Started from and
when I was, let's see, at the age of about 10 or so. That time, my father died when I was 12 years old, incidentally. And he used to take us earlier in the previous 1937, we went to Kashmir. He took us there. And thereafter, he stayed in Panchgini for a very long time. So we had to visit him there because he was not well. And before that, also in the early 30s, when I was say 6 or 7 years old, he used to take us for a picnic in the low nearby hills, Thane especially. And then he, with his Parsi partner, he used to go out for monsoon hikes and monsoon outings. And I remember number of such outings when we were together. And my elder brother also, means cousin, was there. They were staying with us. So they also kept us interested in these things. Then after my father's death, my mother was also equally interested. She was quite young. My father died and she was only 35 years old. So she looked after us, and we went around with her also various places. I remember going to Kashmir again in 45, and then later on
again means you had been there first.
Kashmir in 1937 with my father and mother. We had gone there, and that was a month's holiday, something like that. In those days, you keep a house there and stayed for a long time in Pelgam and in a houseboat in Srinagar. Even in Gulmarg, you rent out a house. So it was not just visit and come back. It was just enjoy, stay there, go up the mountains and go up the valleys, ride horses. That reminds me of Matheran also. That was one of the frequent visits. Matheran, Mambleshwar, and these are hill stations which are enjoyable. Then I remember having gone to Kashmir in 1945, and subsequently later on also individually I'd gone with my family. At that time, my son was there, daughter was there, first the elder daughter, and Mandakini, myself, and a few friends. We had taken a car from Mumbai and driven right up to Gulmarg and all these places. And then we did a couple of treks there. And that got me interested in trekking, really trekking. We went to Gangabal, Lidarwat, and one more place, Vishnu, no, not Vishnu Sar, but nearby certain places were there where we did 3 treks of 2 to 3 days each. But I found that going in the mountains in the snow, one need to have all equipment and some training. So I realized that I should try to undergo mountaineering training, which started in 1959, one year after the visit to Kashmir, which I referred just now.
So how was this that time Kashmir and mountains? I mean, for a comparison, because you are now talking of history, nobody would know what was in 37. That can you describe?
37,
Difference then and now.
I was too young to describe. I was 9 years old at that time. But later on, when I went with my mother in 45, I was pretty old enough to understand. And thereafter, in 58, when I went with my family, with Mandakini, Sachin, and Parul, and a few friends, that time, so 3 visits can be compared. It was very peaceful. On the contrary, I should say, lot of space was available during the time when we went there. I have not visited Kashmir thereafter, so I can only talk about the situation there. Lidarwat, we stayed at Pelgaon. It was more or less a village, absolutely a village, but what we see in television and in various films, now it has become a town. Even Gulmarg has become a town. In those days, there were cottages in Gulmarg, very nice cottages. You can hire them up. Of course, financially the costs are now haywire. At that time, it was very nominal. So I would say that those days were very enjoyable, peaceful. Traveling was easy, and food was nice. Vegetables were plenty. You go in a shikara and move around. I took a lot of pictures, incidentally, of my trips in Kashmir. That was very. I did some filming also, and amateur filming, and there was a good deal of photography subject-wise that I could select. So that was the beginning of my trekking, actually. Then after coming to in Bombay back in 58, I decided to go to Himalayan Mountaineering Institute for a basic course.
This was in which year?
In 1959, in the month of May, I decided to go there. And at that time, my wife and children also came up to Darjeeling, and they stayed at Darjeeling whilst I joined the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute basic course.
You were how old?
At that time, I was 30 years old. That was the time when I took the course. Brigadier Gyan Singh was the principal. Ten Singh Norgay was the director of field training. And there were 6 or 7 Sherpa instructors, including Gombu, Angkami, Danamgyal, Topge, and 2 more. Pasang was there. And Danamgyal's elder brother, he was also there. So there were 6 or 7. And in those days, the units were of 4. 1 instructor and 4 students. 7-8 days we spent in Darjeeling, moving around, exercising, hearing lectures, and thereafter a trek right from Darjeeling, walking up to base camp at Jongri, and not Jongri, beyond that, there's a place called, what is the name?
Chaurikian.
Chaurikyang, yes. Chaurikyang base camp. Jongri was just one before that. There in base camp, there was a program for almost 3 weeks and 1 week back on the way. So, on the whole, it was a quite a interesting thing for me and lot of instructive experience that I got during that. I think it was all 40 days course in all. Nowadays, I think it is a month's course probably because of logistics of traveling may be reduced, etc. So, after coming from these courses, I got more interested in rock climbing, hiking, and mountaineering also. In a way, extension of activities from Sahyadri to Himalayan mountaineering. So, 59, when we returned to Bombay, Brigadier Gyan Singh had asked us whether we can organize some rock climbing courses in Western Ghats, where he will send his own Sherpas, instructors, free of cost. Only we have to pay their hospitality in Mumbai and look after them. This was a very good suggestion put forward by Brigadier Gyan Singh because he thought that propagating mountaineering should take to mountains wherever they are in India. Himalaya is of course there, but Western Ghats are there, and there would be other places like near Abu or near South India. There are places like Hampi where rocks are there, Bangalore are there, and near about Calcutta also there are some small hills. So he thought that mountaineering should be spread and more people should do rock climbing as a prelude to more mountaineering. So we got together, and there was a team of about 7, 8, 10 people here in Mumbai who wanted to conduct these rock climbing courses in Mumbai with the help of instructors from HMI. Initially, we thought that it should be done under the auspices of the Himalayan Club because in those days we had no other club in Mumbai, and Himalayan Club was represented by an honorary local secretary, Mr. R.E. Hawkins, and most of the members of this particular activity were members of the Himalayan Club. So we approached Mr. Hawkins that such a proposal is there, and you lend the name of the Himalayan Club for the purpose. But he was not very sure of whether things would work out smoothly or not, and therefore he said that Himalayan Club will not be able to sponsor such a program. So, in order to take advantage of the offer of Brigadier Gyan Singh, we formed a committee which is called Mountaineering Course Sponsoring Committee. And we thought we will not form a very stable club initially. We'll see the experience, and later on, if necessary, we can form an association of this nature.
Now in this who all were there? Close associates,
The
organizers?
close associates and organizers, if I recall properly, now it's a 40 years or 45 years old memory that I have to scratch. The person who was very active was Mr. Ashok Madgavkar. Then there was Navneet Parekh. There was Rusi Gandhi. Then Jimmy Batley Boy, Malti Jhaveri, Kisan Mehta, then Laijawala, who was my classmate in HMI, he also was there. I think, then there was one Mr. Natwar by Sangvi. So about 10 or 11 people were there. And what we did first was to exploit the various areas near Mumbai where we can have rock climbing courses. We visited Canary Caves, we visited one or two places, I think near Lonavala also, and finally we visited more on the side of Parsik Hills. And we selected that Parsik Hills is the closest to Mumbai. We can have facility of some camping area over there. So that was the one which we selected. One of us had contact with there is a company called Machinery Manufacturing Company Limited, which was connected with merchant family, and they had houses on the hill top at Parsik. So we tried to take advantage of those houses for our camps, which was fortunately given very graciously by the management. And not only they gave us the houses, but they gave us the facility to bring water by their tankers, etc., to set up a camp, and there were two big houses available. So we started that. Brigadier Gyan Singh came one week before the course started. He visited the place and he said, this is a very nice area for rock climbing. There are nursery rocks, there are big slabs, there are also some pinnacles, and there is also trekking area over the hills. So these are the things which attracted our attention, and it was approved by Brigadier Gyan Singh and also the instructors who were with us at that time.
Who were the instructors?
The initial instructors that came were three. One was Nawang Gombu, then Topge, and third was Pasang. But later on in subsequent seasons, Ang Temba also came once, and Fenjo also came subsequently. But then they changed because this program went on for years. So depending upon the convenience, the instructors used to come. So coming back to these courses, they were a good success in 59 winter and early 60. So there were about 4 or 5 courses we conducted, and one of them was ladies course. So the ladies course was very popular, and it got filled up. About 25-30 ladies joined the course, and that was the beginning of mountaineering courses for ladies anywhere in India. And this also was one of the reasons which prompted HMI to conduct rock climbing courses for ladies. So that was a good forerunner for this kind of activities to be exposed to ladies. Well, thereafter the more and more activities were conducted under the committee that was formed for the purpose, which worked for another 2 years as a committee. Then it was decided that since the activity has stabilized and good deal of interest has been sustained in Mumbai, why not form a club which will be permanent? Because Himalayan Club had at that time declined to sponsor or host these activities. Probably they thought that it is not within the purview of their objectives or whatever. So the Climbers Club was then formed, and under the Climbers Club's flag, good deal of friends got together, number of persons joined the activities, outings were held, regular rock climbing courses, of course, were still continuing. And then there was also uh, a small bulletin that was published, and the idea was also there to conduct some Himalayan program. So in 1961, there was one climbing course in the Himalaya form, sponsored under the auspices of that committee at that time. So the committee again invited two instructors, or rather three instructors from HMI, which Brigadier Gyan Singh could spare for us in the Valley of Flowers. So that expedition or training expedition had about 12 or 13 number of students who joined, and we had thought of climbing small peaks around Valley of Flowers and cross couple of passes. It was on the whole a good success because a lot of exposure was given to youngsters who had not done rock climbing courses before. Only two of us or three of us had done it at that time, but rest of the people had done basic and advanced rock climbing training at Mumra, where the same club had conducted. One small peak was climbed, about 16,000 feet. Then we crossed 16,000 feet pass, went on the other side, Khulia Garvia Valley, and tried to climb Nilgiri Parbat. We had a 7-day period for that, and that was finished. That time was over. So we had to come back. Anyway, this was a good beginning, good exercise. And it was done very, very economically, which was also another aspect, that people would pay for their climbing at that time. So
that time, how was the Indian mountaineering scene? Was this a pioneering effort, or people had done something before? How do you put it in context with other climbing?
yes, I am talking of 1961. So, as everybody knows, in 1951, Trishul was climbed by Indian team led by Greenwood and Gurdiyal Singh, yes, of the Doon School, yes. The Doon School group climbed that, and thereafter maybe some climbs have taken place, but the major climb that took place was in 1959 on Cho Oyu. Keki Bunsha was the leader of the expedition, and he convinced the bureaucrats in the Defense Department and in the Home Department at that time that a big mountaineering effort should be sponsored by and supported by the government. And he could convince them that yes, this is a good idea, and they sponsored this Choyu expedition, which ultimately led to the foundation of Indian Mountaineering Foundation. But the Climbers Club or the Mountaineering Sponsoring Committee in Mumbai had no direct link with the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, though the idea was to more or less encourage mountaineering in general, but it was in the infancy in popularizing mountaineering. So our efforts were on the whole on a very low profile. Thereafter, Indian mountaineering has really taken a big stride under the Indian Mountaineering Foundation's own sponsored expeditions, and number of them were sponsored over a period of time. mainly 1950, Brigadier Gyan Singh was asked to lead Indian Everest expedition, the first Indian Everest expedition. In 59, when I was there as a student, Brigadier Gyan Singh was invited to be the leader of this expedition. And he narrated a very interesting episode. He said that he was invited by the Indian Mountaineering Foundation to lead the first expedition. So he gave this news to Tenzing that such a things happened and they are sponsoring an expedition to Mount Everest and the sponsors are asking him to lead. क्या advice है आपकी? So when he when he asked that, Tenzing's reaction, according to Brigadier Gyan Singh, was very reserved. He was not enthusiastic about it. Yes, yes, go. And he said, all right, अच्छा है, we'll talk it over next day, something like that. Then he must have thought over it and whatever it is. Probably Tenzing thought that he should have been given the leadership on that first Indian Everest expedition because he was he climbed Everest in 53 and soon thereafter there are expeditions going and why not he? But ultimately Brigadier Gyan Singh mentioned that this organization is required and so many things are involved in this. So finally he consented, yes, it's fine thing, you go. He called him brother, you go. So that's a small incident that we came to know at that time because I happened to be at that in the Darjeeling and in HMI. So coming back to Bombay and the Climbers Club, the activities went on very smoothly up to 1971, I should say, and under the banner of the Climbers Club. Thereafter, the club sponsored first expedition, the Climbers Club, organized by Harish Kapadia to Thar Kot. That was the first expedition sponsored by the Climbers Club. Apart from the other one, which is in 1961, which was a own expedition, in the sense not expedition but climbing camp as it was called, climbing camp in the Himalaya. The proposal was very nicely mooted that we have one camp there and people will come, take training, go away, people will come, take training and go away, something like that. But unfortunately only one set came, unlike what we did in Parsik. Parsik mein, there was one camp and thereafter people used to come for 4 days, 5 days, number of courses were there. So Harish Kapadia's expedition was the first one sponsored, and then next year, I think 1970, another expedition was sponsored by the Climbers Club, and that was to Bethartoli Himal and also Trishul expedition of the ladies group. But both the groups were more or less organized together and harmoniously working. So the Bethartoli expedition had a very unfortunate accident.
You yourself went, so how was the experience? How did it all start? Approximately a little bit of route and location.
As far as the expedition is concerned, the route, as you know, Bethartoli Himal mountain is situated on the outer rim of Nanda Devi sanctuary. And Nanda Devi sanctuary, as you know, has two such rings, the outer and inner. So, along with Trishul, and Bethartoli, and so many other mountains. These are on the outer ring. In order to reach there, one has to enter the Rishi Ganga valley. Either you enter through the river route, which is very difficult, or you enter through higher pass, go past Joshimath, then you go to Tapoban, then you go to Lata, which is when you go up the mountain side. Lata is the last village, and then there is Lata Pass, and after the pass you cross one or two smaller passes, higher one about 14,000 also, and then descend down to Rishi Ganga. And from Rishi Ganga you take a separate Trishul Nala, and from Trishul Nala you have a base camp, which we had two base camps, one base camp for two expeditions. So that is how the area is juxtaposed.
So what happened on the expedition?
Expedition, there were two separate groups, as I said. The ladies group went up to Trishul and they climbed it. Unfortunately, one of the members of the ladies group fell sick, and she had to be carried down to a lower level. The base camp was around 15,500 feet, and there was another camping area below, which is around 13,000. So Dr. Nayak was on the expedition, on the men's expedition, and myself, we were at that time at the base camp. So we had to bring Rekha down to this lower level camp and stay there and see that she recoups, which she did. We had to spend about 3 days over there. Then all of a sudden, one afternoon, a porter came down. In those days, we did not have walkie-talkies and such gadgets at any particular camp, and therefore all messages were sent through carriers, through messengers would have to come. So when we were there, it was really bad weather, heavily foggy, rain, sheet, and snowing. There were two tents. One tent in which Rekha was there, and another tent in which myself and Dr. Nayak were there. And in those days we had those air mattresses. Had we not had the air mattresses, we would be in water most of the time because the tents would leak due to rain. So as soon as this person came, he informed us that there was an accident on the mountain, and that some people are maybe dead or some people are injured, and doctors should come up. So we, both myself and Prabhakar Nayak, left the camp. Rekha stayed there along with the other attendant Sherpas. So she was recovering, so there was no difficulty as far as that part is concerned. So we reached back to the base camp, and we came to know later on, after reaching, that there was an avalanche on the main peak of Bethartoli Himal. But before that, I would like to mention that Bethartoli south was climbed earlier by Harish Kapadia and Ramesh Desai. There was a small mishap earlier also whilst attempting Bethartoli, but fortunately no major casualty took place. So we came to know when we reached base camp that there was an accident, and after a day or so, Harish Kapadia came down and narrated what had happened. What happened was that there was a group of 7 persons uh, on the mountain, Bethartoli main, and because, as I said, that period was very bad, lot of snow, lot of sheet, lot of fog, etc., and it's remained there for a number of days. So the group that was there, there were very important, very able mountain guides in the personality of Ankami. Then there was one more. Who was that second man?
Nitin Patel.
No, the Sherpa.
Napa Sherpa.
Not Napa. The senior one.
Pasang Timba.
Pasang Temba. And one more Sherpa was two instructors and 4 Sherpas and Nitin and Arun. So the 7 people were there at that time. So they decided after a couple of days of bad weather that it is no longer possible for them to climb any further. They had reached a certain ledge between the south and the north peak. So they decided we should return now. And as they returned, at one point, the avalanche took place. They were not very high from the basin, but sufficiently high so that the avalanche carried them into the basin where there were crevasses. And in that accident, number of them, three of them disappeared into the crevasse, and they were submerged into the snow, and their bodies were never found. One of them, that is Nitin Patel, he was found dead, but he was more or less at the edge of the crevasse. The other 2 people who had fallen into the crevasse but were able to come out were one Sherpa instructor and one Sherpa porter and another member, that is Arun Samant. They came out of the crevasses with the help of ropes and each other. So they found that Nitin was not alive and there was bad weather and still continuing. So they thought of, now there is no point in doing anything just now because they themselves were shaken. So they left this area and came to Camp 2, which was little higher on the side of the Bethartoli south. And they met at that time. I think you were also there at that time. And Ramesh Desai, who was the leader of the expedition, he was also there, and 1 or 2 other Sherpas were there. They narrated the whole event, but it was not possible for them to do anything on that particular moment. And it was decided that there is no chance of any rescue operation. All that one can do is to see that the body of Nitin, which was on the surface, could be buried there because they cannot perhaps bring it down from that height down to the base camp and then from base camp to some other place. So if I remember rightly, the next day this operation was not done, but the day after the operation was done, when Sherpas could go to the site of the accident, buried Nitin in the snow over there, and they came back. And then we had to wind up the expedition, come down. After reaching Joshimath, or before that, messages were sent to the relatives and other people concerned that such and such an accident has taken place. Relatives of Nitin Patel also came down at Joshimath, and they were not convinced that Nitin was no longer there, and they wanted another expedition to start or ask us to join that expedition. And we were not in a position because we knew that there was the fact of death of Nitin Patel, but his relations would not relent, and whilst we could not join, he did go to the Lata village and tried to find out what has happened, what has not happened, etc. But then it's a different story. Then
So
we came back.
The real story began, I believe, after you came back to Bombay. So that's what happened. The sponsors, Climbers Club, what was their attitude? And what all happened there?
Well, it's a very long story, but
but in
cut it
short,
short.
yeah.
Cut it short. Now, what had happened is that
How did it start?
in 1970, this expedition took place in May, June, and we returned home, and we narrated all these various events that took place. A small report was given to the sponsors, that is the Climbers Club's committee, and it appeared that people have understood the objective dangers that were there, which caused this particular event, an accident, etc. We had a rock climbing course at that time during the winter, and as far as I am concerned, I came to know during that rock climbing course, that is in December 70 and early 71, that some thinking is going on in certain people's mind.
Who are with certain people?
As far as I know, it was Ashok Madgavkar and Malti Jhaveri, Nadkarni, then Amladi. These are the people who were at the helm of affairs at that time, members of the managing committee, though I was the president, incidentally, and they thought that there is some negligence on the part of the leaders of Bethartoli expedition which has caused this accident. So I was really surprised as to how they can relate individual person's capacity against the nature's forces as if they have caused this accident. Nature's force is beyond the control of anybody, and we were sufficiently experienced people and not just laymen who would not know that mountaineering activity involves risks of life. This is a fundamental thing that everybody ought to know. It's a dangerous activity, and all that we do is to see that we use safety measures and try to minimize those hazards and come back. But yet, these people who were with us ought to know by their own experience and the experience of literature that there is such a thing like accident in the mountains, and which is beyond control. So I was not in a position to appreciate this attitude, which ultimately led to a very serious situation.
What I mean, they
The-
formally submitted something.
What happened is that they said that we must censure the leaders. And how do we do this? They said that they said, look here, we want to discuss this matter in the managing committee. So they brought up this matter in the managing committee, and some of them brought one paper listing the negligence, trying to accuse the leader of this, that, etc. So Harish Kapadia and myself were members of the managing committee. As I said, I was the president at that time. We tried, both of us, to tell the other members and colleagues that look, this is an accident and it cannot be attributed to an individual and negligence is not there. So they accused that the leaders ought to have been on the main mountain. They have left it to Sherpas. Sherpas are not competent people to lead and decide matters. However, we said, okay, look, it's not ordinary porters who have gone there. There are two instructors, experienced mountaineers. One of them have climbed the Mount Everest expedition, in Indian expedition, and they are not people who do not know what they are into. However, that was also brushed aside. They denigrated the Sherpas. They also said that the leaders should have been done there, should have done this, should have not done this. So there were a lot of charges discussed in the committee. So ultimately, they did not agree with whatever we said. And what was worst was that they made out a charge sheet, kind of a thing, and published it immediately in the next bulletin, which was shortly coming out, censuring the leaders and say all this criticism of the expedition. And what was worse was they did not give the opportunity to the leaders, that is Ramesh Desai or Harish Kapadia, to answer those charges and simultaneously publish them in the same bulletin of our club. In other words, they used a lot of unfair practices. In the first place, natural justice demanded that you give the charge sheet to the person whom you are accusing and let them come before you, give their written reply, then consider these matters in an objective manner. However, all these things were put on the shelf and they were bent on doing this kind of injustice because of their prejudice against the leaders. So when this was published, a lot of hue and cry was there amongst the members, not only of the expedition, but also members of the club at large. And during the course of the next few months, good number of letters came to the club criticizing the managing committee for their short-sightedness, unfair practices, and wrong accusation, not appreciating the mountaineering spirit and the rest. And what was worse was that they did not want to publish these papers. So I had to insist with the leaders concerned that if you have accused the expedition of anything, then their answers must come in the same manner. So finally, in the next bulletin, which was published after a couple of months, all the letters and the criticism and the replies of the leaders were printed. Some of the members also replied. I also gave my own comments. So Harish Kapadia and Ramesh Desai, Arun Samant also gave his version of the mountain, the climb, etc. And these were ultimately published. But the whole episode left a bad taste in me and Harish. And I should say also it was we were supported by Ashwin Mehta at that time, who was the editor of the journal of the bulletin, I should say. So we decided that there is no other way. This is a very sad event that has taken place, and it affected our relationship with the club and with the persons concerned. So I resigned as a president and also a member of the committee. Similarly, Harish also resigned, and Ashwin Mehta also resigned. Three of us resigned, and we left the club. It was a difficult decision for me also, because after all, I had grown myself in my thinking, in my exposure with people through this activity, right from 1959 right up to 71, when this final events took place.
So with that, I mean, now, say if we slightly go back, now Nilkant, I believe that was a major, let's say, affair in your life. I mean, so what was it about in short? And then what was the whole administrative and bureaucratic attack on you, and how did you stand that?
Nilakantha expedition was sponsored by Indian Mountaineering Foundation in 1961. It was one of the 3 expeditions sponsored by the club, by the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, for a selection of leaders and members of the next year's Everest expedition. So this particular mountain, Nilkantha, is a very difficult mountain which is close to Badrinath, just behind at the backyard of Badrinath, and everybody admires the beauty of the mountain. It's a very pyramidical shaped mountain with steep slopes and ice walls. This mountain was not climbed before, though it was attempted, but not much was climbed on that particular peak. So the leader was Narinder Kumar, and there were 5 or 6 other members. They went and they approached the mountain through Satopant Glacier, where they had their base camp, and they established Camp 1 on the spur, then Camp 2 little above, then Camp 3 under the ice wall, and Camp 4 and 5 on the upper face, north face of the mountain. Now, the issue was there was bad weather when the group was there on the north face, and it was such a pathetic planning. First of all, the leader had not made sufficient study about the topography of the mountain, with the result that the heights that he thought his camps were exceedingly exaggerated. What he thought to be 400 foot from the summit as the location of final camp turned out, according to my estimate, to be almost 1600, 1700 feet below. Now, the weather had turned bad. They had no food, no water with them to talk about. They had only one tent with them, and 7 of them were sandwiched in the tent for the last 2-3 days. When they were at the final camp, the leader allowed one team of members, 1 member and 2 Sherpas, to attempt. They hardly went a couple of feet higher and returned. Then at about 10 o'clock or 10:30, they thought that second team should go. One Mr. O.P. Sharma and two Sherpas
It's 10:30 in the morning.
in the morning.
Afternoon.
Morning. Earlier 8:30 they say the first team went and then came back. Then they were debating what to do, what not to do, and ultimately O.P. Sharma said, "I would like to go," and KP and Colonel Kumar said, "All right, you go." So he went along with the two Sherpas, and the weather was still bad, foggy, and they claimed that they reached the summit at around 5:30 in the evening, and on the return they were benighted, and they took shelter under a rock, and next day in the morning at around 10 o'clock they came to the highest camp, Camp 5. Now they declared that we have climbed the summit, so naturally the leader was elated, and they came down. In the process, the weather had gone bad. Leader suffered from frostbite, and I think one or two Sherpas also suffered from the same. Everybody was down by health, and the expedition declared that they have climbed the mountain. The IMF naturally was jubilant, and they declared that this is a virgin peak and Indian climbers have climbed it. The heights were given by the leader, brochures were published, and articles came in the Times of India in a number of series, with the result that different heights were given for different camps. By accident, I happened to look at the Himalayan Journal, in which a mountain photograph was there, taken by John Jackson when he was climbing on the north side of Nilkant, far away, about 7.5 miles away, on an avalanche peak. So this photograph showed the mountain in its true perspective, because it was taken from a very high ground and at long distance. So when I saw that mountain, the picture which is in the Himalayan Journal, I realized that the heights that were shown by the Indian Nilkant expedition could not match the locations on this mountain. And I tried to figure out approximate heights, and I discovered that there were variants. What they considered to be their highest camp to be 400 feet below the summit, according to me, was much lower, and the time available, etc., to climb up and come down in that bad weather could not be matched and could not give any credence. Unfortunately, they did not have any photographs. Had they brought any photographs, then at least one can say there is some evidence of
No
having
photograph
climbed.
at last camp or anything.
There are no photographs. Actually, it was said that the whole roll was exposed by the leader by mistake or whatever when they opened the camera at the highest camp. So there are no photographs, only the version of the leader and the version of the climber himself, who was a novice actually. He had not had much experience. And there were all the psychological factors for them to believe that they have climbed it. Bad weather, fatigued, together with pressure to say that we have succeeded in the expedition. All these things are psychological factors, and objective factors were that they were still far below what they thought. If I believe that I am only so close to the summit, I can take one of the hump or one of the ledge to be the summit if I don't see beyond, assuming that I am very genuinely interested in reaching the end of it. So this episode
So then what about you wrote to IMF? How did it start bureaucratically?
Bureaucratically, I wrote a small essay about 10-15 pages in which I questioned whether Nilgant has been climbed at all. Because I put down the figures as given by the expedition of the camps and what was evident from the photograph which was analyzed by me and which heights were shown objectively through a certain photo altitude chart which I prepared. And I published this. In a sense, I sent this to the Himalayan Club because I was not connected with the Himalayan Club at that time in 1962 when this incident took place.
But you were a member.
I was a member of the Himalayan Club many years before. I think 2 or 3 years before. Brigadier Gyansingh introduced me in 59 after I did the course. So I sent it to them. I sent it to the Alpine Club. I sent it to the Royal Geographical Society. And I sent it to the Indian Mountaineering Foundation. The person at the helm of affair was H.C. Sarin. He was holding this baby of IMF. And there was one Mr. Khera, I believe, who was the president at that time of IMF. And I did send one separate letter and my report to the Prime Minister's office, which I received acknowledgement also later on. The IMF immediately took action according to Mr. Sarin's letters to me that they were very keen to see that Indian mountaineering should have integrity and actual factual things in their expedition reports. So according to him, he called Brigadier Gyansingh and he called another person from the Survey of India to vet all these data that I had put in my essay. After a couple of weeks and months, I got a reply from from Sarin that we have gone into the matter in detail, and here is a report from one of the survey officer who thinks who has given the report saying that the climb has taken place. There are errors about heights, etc., but it's not as much as your figures are. There was one Colonel Nair who had given a report at that time. So I went through the report once again and looked at the various reasons given by him, and I analyzed them and I told them, okay, well, look, I have gone through this report that you have sent to me, but I would like to have a look at what material you have furnished to your survey officer. Can you send them to me also so that I can rely on them and interpret them? So Mr. Sarin said that no, we cannot send you all those things. You should have trust in our experts. And therefore he refused to send it. So after that I had another round of longer essay and longer notes prepared on each and every point that was raised in the reply to my comments. And I told Mr. Sarin in a letter that since you are not furnishing me the details, I have no other alternative but to publish this. And that also I gave it to the respective institutions which I mentioned. Having realized that there are grave errors in their own experts' opinion, the Indian Mountaineering Foundation put up another 3-man committee to look into the matter, headed by Colonel Jaswal, who was the then principal of IMF.
HMI?
Yes, HMI. He was the principal at that time, and he along with two other members. One Datta, he was from the Survey of India, and Major Dias, he was an ex leader of the Indian Mountaineering Mount Everest expedition. So these three people went into the my replies, etc., and they also drastically changed the figures given for the height of the camps, and they went into the interrogation with the leaders and the members, the summiters, and all those people who were concerned, and they conceded certain points of my notes. Conceded meaning the heights were not as accurate as given by the leader or by Colonel Nair, and that my heights were more or less correct. Although the final height was of Camp 5, they raised it a bit, which is not objectively agreeable, because we do not know, we do not have exact location determined objectively as to where the camp was. If you raise your camp little higher, you can get a higher point, but it is just a matter of narration. I was here, I was not here. Anyway, so they did say that the description of Mr. O.P. Sharma, who was the summiter, was not convincing, and it was not conclusive also. However, we give the benefit of doubt, and the climb has taken place. But we think that if to remove doubts, next year another expedition should be sent to the mountain. These were the recommendations of the three-man committee. So they did cast some doubt, but basically they wanted to hush up that this mountain is climbed, and the Indian Mountaineering Foundation should take the feather in their cap. And that was the end of that particular episode as far as the Indian Nilkant expedition is concerned.
Have you seen that file? It is believed that Sarin wrote on a file when the report was against him about Nilkant, that what is this, Jan? You want to displease the Prime Minister? Change it.
I have not seen.
That is the story.
That may be the story, but
and it was seen by Hukam Singh when he was Secretary of IMF.
Well, this is something of a revealing nature. I was told that the Nilkant files were missing later on, and maybe there may be a couple of reasons why they do not want to keep the record over there about the investigation and what happened thereafter. But I must also point out here that the Alpine Journal editor, in two editorials in different years, have drawn very positive attention to the study that I had made. And they did write that this committee is kind of a whitewashing committee, and neither say here, neither say there, and to please everybody. Because the committee also praised Mr. Nanavati for having done and drawn attention and for his studies and this and that and other things. So the Alpine Club's journal has done a good, given a good report on the study made. So Nilkant episode was my first skirmish with the exposition of any major expedition. And simultaneously with that, there was another expedition from Gujarat, which went on the Gangotri Glacier area, and they had climbed, that the ladies group of that particular expedition had climbed a peak called Matri in the same area. So
Matri no kari, then we'll go.
So this Matri expedition was a very simple mistake done by the girls. Now, what had happened is that they had relied on a map which was published in a layman's language and layman's reading material across Gangotri Glacier. There was a small sketch map in which the Gangotri Glacier and its tributaries were shown, and this Raktavarna Glacier, no, Shvetambar Glacier, no? What
Shvetavarna.
Shvetavarna Glacier. So Shvetavarna Glacier had number of tributaries, and one of them was Thelu tributary. And in that map, that Thelu tributary showed as if it is coming from Matri mountain. But actually Thelu had a mountain called by the same name, and there was a wall which was quite high, and there was a depression on the other side going to Matri Valley. These people thought that when we climbed a mountain, a peak at the end of the valley, we were at Matri. But unfortunately, they were on Thelu, which is 19,600 or so, whilst Matri was 22 some amount. So this mistake was done by them. And there was a big blah blah in Gujarat because the Gujarat first expedition, and they climbed 2-3 peaks in the area, and this was a girls' expedition, so they made a big feather and newspaper article along with the maps were shown. So I pointed out to the leader, to the sponsors, that is the Gujarat government, that this is an error of misidentification of a mountain. Now that is something different than what was in Nilkantha. Nilkantha is you are on the same mountain, but whether you reach the top or not. Here is that you are mistaking a feature to be what it is not. So that's how that particular Matri was exposed. A lot of correspondence took place. I explained to the leaders that look, there is a height, there is a fall, there is a map, but having got the honors and having got the all this blah blah about their achievement, it is difficult for them to come back unless they are very objective about it. So they did not relent. Ultimately, Brigadier Gyan Singh, who was very patronizing towards these girls because they were once their students, he also tried to convince them, but they were not willing to admit their mistake. So he also wrote that this is a wrong thing, and you should not have admitted, should not have said that we climbed Matri. And in the records of the IMF also, I believe they have removed this assent. But still, this Gujarat government and the Gujarat people, whoever are the sponsors, they still stick to it, even a wrong claim. So this is a question of human nature. Perhaps they don't want to admit mistakes.